to the UIAAA Connection podcast. GoFan and VNN are proud to be the exclusive sponsor of the UIAAA Connection. Now a combined company, GoFan and VNN provide a seamless integration for digital ticketing and athletic websites. Direct your fans to one place for all your athletic events, communications, and tickets to home and away games. Thank you to GoFan and VNN for their exclusive sponsorship of the UIAAA Connection.
Welcome back to another edition of the UIAAA Connection. I'm your host, Mark Hutch-Hunter. Today we have as our special guest, Nate Foster, the Director of Athletics at Summit Academy. Welcome to the podcast, Nate.
Hey, Hutch. Thanks for having me. I can't wait.
Let's have you begin by sharing with our audience here in the U.S. and across the world where you went to school, where you graduated from, your first job, those types of things.
Yeah. So I grew up in Cottonwood Heights, Utah, so kind of by the mouth of Big Cottonwood Canyon. Grew up there playing sports. I was a Brighton kid, so going back, I know being over at Jordan, we had that rivalry or pseudo rivalry, so we kind of had back and forth all through my high school career. So I was a Brighton kid growing up. Then from there, I went to the University of Utah for my undergrad. From there, I started off in their athletic training program, and then I transitioned into their health promotion and education program, kind of getting my degree in health promotion. I started my first job at Fans, so it was a sports place in the mall. I think a lot of Utah people will recognize that. So selling jerseys of professional athletes, college jerseys, all of that stuff. I knew that I always wanted to be around athletics in some capacity in my life, whether that was playing, watching, supporting, coaching, being an athletic director now. So working there, then I got my degree and I decided to kind of go more into the health field for a little bit. So I actually got a job working for the Road Home Homeless Shelter. And I was a client educator over there, in charge of getting clients rehoused, educating landlords on our population, dispelling the rumors about that population. And I kind of just got to thinking, I really love the world of education. So what can I do to kind of make a bigger impact? So decided to take my sports background, take my love for education background, combine it. I went back to Westminster College to get my master's degree in education as a PE teacher. And then I was very, very lucky that I got a job teaching middle school in a school just in the backyard that I grew up in. And I was there for about 5 years, and I led their intramural program, their after-school intramural program, coaching things like basketball, cross country.
Is that Butler or Albion?
It was Albion Middle.
Okay, yeah. Albion. That's because my house is like a mile from Albion.
Oh, really? Gotcha. Have you lived there for a long time?
Oh yeah, just on Quill Hollow. You turn in on Quill Hollow, it rolls around. My kids went to Albion. Of course, this was back in, let me think. They graduated, the one from Brighton in 96. I think I had 96, 99, 2002.
Okay. So my brother graduated 2004 from Brighton. So they may have just missed each other.
When did you graduate?
I graduated 2010.
Okay, so you were at Brighton when I was still at Jordan then.
Yeah, I think you were at Jordan until 2013, 2014?
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So yeah, we crossed paths and didn't even know it. There you go.
We crossed paths. I'm sure you kicked me out of a couple games when I was a fan in those stands or something like that. No, so yeah, growing up in that area, I mean, sports is king over in that area. So played in those sports, all of that stuff. So yeah.
So talk about talk about your youth sports like junior jazz, U conference football, baseball.
Of course, played junior jazz. So junior jazz, I was the kid. My brother always likes to make fun of me. I was the kid that I had the sports goggles back when that was the thing. So had those sports goggles. I played on the Butler 9th grade basketball team. And then when I transitioned into high school, dabbled a little bit in basketball and football. Unfortunately, our football team was pretty good. And we had a couple of kids that played the same position as me that were a little bit better than me. So they went on to play kind of D1, D2 football. And I was kind of left on those sidelines watching, but definitely enjoyed it. Loved chopping it up with Mr. Ball, who was our athletic director there at Brighton at the time. He was a
I know
great
him
man.
well.
Yeah, great
Good.
guy. Um, and so, yeah, kind of went that route in the high school athletics realm.
Well, Nate, let's have you talk for a minute about some of the mentors and leaders that you've had in your life that have made a big difference to you.
Yeah, so my biggest mentors are always going to be my siblings. So I have a sister who's 12 years older than me, a brother who's 6 years older than me. Um, we banded together from the time we were born. We grew up in a house that was a little dysfunctional. Both of our parents, alcoholics, got kind of into the wrong scene in the parenting world. And so we kind of depended a lot on each other. Uh, my brother and sister raised me. They were great role models for me growing up. My brother was a multi-sport athlete, great baseball player for Brighton. My sister played softball. So they were definitely my biggest mentors growing up, giving me something to look up to, role models in that realm, and they still are today. As far as in the world of athletics, kind of who I really like to look up to, I had the opportunity to be a first year athletic director last year on ADEC. So I got the opportunity to work with people like you and
Mm.
Andy and Lee and Everett and Sharon and like all these really, really high achieving athletic directors and getting to ask you guys questions and sit in that room at ADEC and see 30 different people that have been doing this a lot longer than me. And so being able to pick your guys' brain was definitely kind of one of the biggest benefits to me being on ADEC last year.
Excellent. Let me ask you a little bit of a personal question here, Nate. What's
Yes,
your
sir.
biggest failure or disappointment in life, and what did you learn from it?
Disappointment in life. Ooh, that's tough. I would say last year as a first year AD, I would consider the whole thing kind of a learning experience, right?
Hmm.
I wouldn't say disappointment, but I would say big learning experience. My philosophy here at Summit is every single day we are going to get at least 1% better than we were the day before. So last year, I would consider everything kind of a disappointment because I know that every single day this year we are getting even better. Um, I have behind me, I'm going to grab it just so you can see. We have I have bricks. And a lot of my coaches like to make fun of me for these bricks. But every single time that we improve on something or build something better, we are going to lay a brick on this wall behind me. And eventually, the hope is that we have a full brick wall of all these little achievements that we've been able to accomplish over the last couple of years. So, right now, it's pretty thin. We only have about 15 bricks over the last year, but we're looking forward to adding a couple more this year. But I would say biggest failure is kind of stumbling out of the gates last year, trying to take on too much too fast as an athletic director, um, and kind of building from there.
Well, let's have you talk for a minute. So you're at Albion for 5
5 years.
years,
Yep.
and all of a sudden you find yourself at Summit, or did you go somewhere else, or did you go straight from Albion as the AD at Summit, or how did that work out?
Yeah, so I was leading the intramural program over at Albion, and my principal at the time, she actually became the director of Summit Academy, and she she said, "Hey, I don't know what's going to happen, but if I ever need somebody, just know that I'm going to come calling." And I said, "My door's always open, you know my phone." And sure enough, the athletic director at that time decided to step down, and she called me and she said, "Hey, are you interested in this position?" And I said, "Yes, very interested, but I don't want to get this job because I know you, because I know who you are, any of that stuff."
Mm.
I was like, "I want to interview with the admin team without you even present." Thankfully, she respected that. I ended up getting lucky enough to get the opportunity here. Principal Grimmer, Principal Jacobs at the time, they were able to give me this opportunity. They didn't have to. I know that I was coming from a middle school world, jumping into high school, never having coached high school athletics. Um, so it was definitely taking a chance on me. I'd like to think that I've done an okay job sinking or swimming from that jump. But yeah, I'm very grateful to be able to be in this opportunity now.
That's awesome. Let me go back. I wanted to follow up. I should have when we first talked. I'm fascinated. How long did you work for the road home? And when you talked about changing the public's mind about that, I want you to talk a little bit about that because I think there's so many prejudices that people in large have about that. So take a moment and delve into that a little bit more.
Yeah, so my whole kind of career experience has been based around giving back to communities, people, organizations that have kind of made an impact in my life. Um, my dad, during my high school years, for about 2 years, was homeless, and so he took kind of refuge in the road home and the community there, and the assistants and the providers at the road home. So when I got the opportunity to interview for that job, I jumped at the chance. After everything that they did for my dad, getting him back on his feet, all of that stuff, I thought that it was the least that I could do to them was to kind of volunteer my time and help them out in the process. So using my health background, and then kind of my love for helping other people, decided to jump into that world. We were able to dispel kind of a lot of the rumors and stigmas around that population, because a lot of people think that if you're homeless, you're a deadbeat, you're a drug abuser, you're an alcoholic, all of those things. And for 90% of the population, maybe even more now, that's not the case. It's just people falling on hard times. They lost their job. They were surplused. They ended up getting evicted from their house and they just needed a place to stay. It was the most rewarding job I've ever done in my life. It was also the hardest job that I've ever done in my life because it's so hard to not take situations that you experience there home with you at the end of the day. But we did a lot of good. They're still doing a lot of good at the Road Home, and other shelters that are here in Salt Lake. So, yeah, super, super rewarding job. I loved being a part of it.
Well, thank you for sharing that and talking about because to a lot of people that's a difficult thing to talk about. Just like you say, the prejudices and the what people think about that, not really knowing that population. So thank you. So let
Yeah,
me
of
ask you
course.
now back to the AD world. So how did you hear about the UIAAA? How did you become involved? Talk about that for a minute.
Yeah. So when I was a uh, PE teacher over at Albion, I knew that this was something that I was interested in, becoming a high school athletic director. Um, and I was like, where do I start? And so I stumbled upon the NIAAA, the UIAAA, and I actually did my registration before I even became an athletic director. I got an account. I did all the registration stuff. I was reading up on how to become an RAA, a CAA, a
Hmm.
CMAA, all those kind of hurdles that would be in my way. And I just started reading and learning and figuring out kind of how is this possible? How do I get on this path? And so that was kind of how I started with the NIAAA. As soon as I got my job as an athletic director, that's when I was taking classes, LTC 701, 702, 703, kind of checking off all the boxes to eventually get an RAA. CAA, once I'm in this job for 2 years, being able to take that CAA, check that off my list. And then eventually, I would love to get my CMAA. I know that that's kind of the pinnacle, and that's where I want to be. I want to be on that same level with all those other athletic directors that have been doing this for a little bit longer than me.
That's that's awesome. I'm only smiling because I think I got my CMAA back in 2000. So
Okay.
24 years. I think I
Boy.
was maybe one of the first 20 in the United States that got it. So
But hey,
it's a lot
you've
different.
checked off a lot of boxes above that. Even though it's not a certification, you're getting all these awards and accolades, so you definitely deserve all the flowers that you've
Yes.
been given.
Well, thank you. So I want you now to talk a little bit about Summit Academy and to show you my ignorance. When I first became aware of Summit Academy, and this is when I was back at Jordan, so it's got to be probably
Yeah.
close to 20 years ago. I had no idea. I thought that the Summit Academy was the middle school building that's out on 13th East across from Draper Park
Yeah,
Middle.
from
Of
Draper
course,
Park
Draper
Middle.
Park Middle wasn't there at the
Mhm.
time, but so I want you to talk about because your location is out real close to the Real Stadium,
Yeah.
and so talk about the high school, and talk about the two different campuses, and talk about life in a charter school and some of the positives and negatives that come with leading that athletic department.
Yeah. So, Summit Academy, I'm super happy to be a part of it. Like you said, like not a whole lot of people know about us, and that's kind of been one of the hurdles as an athletic director here is kind of the recognition because everybody hears Summit Academy, they see us on their schedule, but they have no idea where we are. And so we actually have four campuses. So we have two middle school, or sorry, two K through 8 campuses, a K through 6, and then our high school over here. So the one that you're talking about over by Draper Park, that is a K through 8. That is our Draper campus. Right up here in the road, on the road in Bluffdale, we have our Independence campus right off of 146th. That's also a K through 8. And then in Bluffdale, we actually have a K through 6, kind of right off of Bangor and Redwood.
Mm,
So that's our K through 6. And then here we have our high school, which is going to be 9, 10, 11, 12. Um, I think that as far as being in a charter world, it's super, super different, but also a lot of the same that you expect from a public school. Our philosophy here is that you get a big school experience, but by being in a small school. So our student body here, we're about 610 kids here at Summit Academy High School. Next year, we are making the move to the 4A classification, and we are going to be by far the smallest school in 4A. Um, I think that being part of a charter school, and we will be the only charter school in 4A, it definitely has its benefits. It definitely has its drawbacks. We don't have necessarily all the support that you would get from a big district, right? If I call a transportation team at Canyon School District, there's 15, 16, 17, 18, 19 people there working. Here at Summit, we have one person that is over transportation for us. And so that's a little bit difficult because it is just one person, but it also is very easy because I know exactly who I need to call when I need something, we need to get something done.
sure.
Um, in my opinion, the biggest benefit is the flexibility that we have. We get to kind of call our own shots and do our own thing. Thankfully, Principal Grimmer, our director Molly Hart, they trust me in this role, and I do have a lot of flexibility. So if I want to change the banners in the gym, if I want to meet with somebody about changing our facilities, I can do all that stuff. If I want to design some wall graphics in the building, I can do that. And a lot of that stuff I can do without jumping through all the hoops that you would normally have to jump through in a big district to get that stuff done. So different, the same, definitely benefits, drawbacks. I think that it's also fun for our kids because they also have that flexibility. I can go to them and say, "Hey, what do you guys want your jerseys to look like? Let's design them together. Come into my office. Let's take our senior captains, sit down, hammer out our uniforms for next year, our spirit packs, and things like that." So definitely, I think a little bit more fun for our kids as well.
Let me ask you a follow-up and talk about the reason that your school decided to move from 3A to 4A, uh, transportation, better experience, or because
Yeah,
like you say,
so
you'll be the smallest school, so that's a tough ask.
yeah, well, my philosophy is and I tell this to my student athletes all the time, like I would rather set the bar super, super high for us instead of adjust setting the bar super low and just having us step over the bar, right? I'd rather adjust the bar than adjust how high we need to jump. So I like the challenge. I think our coaches are up for the challenge. I think our kids are up for the challenge for being the smallest school. Um, Transportation definitely affected the decision a little bit. The world of 3A is a little bit more spread out than I would say
Hmm.
a lot of the 4A schools. Um, so now we're going to be in a region with Orem and Timpanogos, Mountain View. Uinta still will be out in Vernal, so that's always going to be a little bit of a trek. And then the Wasatch schools, once they split into Iron Horse and Wasatch next year, going into 4A. So we look forward to being in that region. I look forward to learning from those athletic directors. Um, in our current region, a lot of our athletic directors were new. Judge, Providence, Juan Diego, we were all kind of new going into this last
Mm.
year. So being able to be in a region with kind of more established athletic directors that have been here a long time, doing this a long time, I think that'll be really good for me and then really good for our programs. Um, so yeah, we're excited about the opportunity. We know that it's going to be tough sledding, maybe there for a little bit. I know that our athletes are really excited about it though, and they're looking forward to the challenge.
Yeah, I'm smiling. This dates me. So I started at Jordan in the fall of 79.
Okay.
And in
How
our
many
league,
classifications back then?
there was only four classifications. We were 3A. In our league, our region was Jordan, Judge, Murray, Tooele, Uinta,
Okay.
Carbon,
Oof.
and Union. I
Oh,
think Union. I may be wrong on the Union one, but that
yeah.
I remember I was
So you
coaching
got
girls
three in there that are
basketball at the time. Yeah.
2 hours
Well,
away.
it's closer to four to Uinta.
Yeah.
I can remember playing at Uinta and taking the bus ride back, making sure all the girls got picked up at 2:30 or
Midnight.
3
Yeah.
in the morning.
1
Well, so
a.m.
I talked to the night custodian. He just let me in. I just went in and because I would have had to go back to my apartment in Sugar House and then get up to get back to school the next day by 7. So I just slept on the couch in the faculty room. But
You're like, I'm just gonna call it a night. I'll be here in the morning.
well, exactly right. But but it's they talk about the travel and that's a long trip, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think some of the best bonding experiences with my
For
team were
sure.
on some of those long trips. So thanks for
Yeah.
sharing that.
I think with travel, that's one of the drawbacks, maybe being a charter, is that we don't have necessarily the budgets that a big public school does for travel.
Right,
Right? And so it's like I said, we have one person that's over our transportation. We have four buses in our fleet. So being able to dedicate a bus to a 5 hour
right.
trip every time that you're going down to Emory or Carbon is going to be tough.
Well, I had you don't know her, but I had Sandy Wagner on here about 4 or 5 weeks ago, and she's the executive director in Alaska. And she's the AD up at Juneau before she worked in the state office. It's a 24-hour ferry ride down to Kitchikan and back to play that high school. And so you got the kids on the boat the whole time, and you got to
Yeah.
worry about them, and you got to feed them, and then you got the contest. So
Oh my goodness.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's a
logistics
little
at
bit
that
different.
level is probably really difficult.
Sure enough. And I realize you've only been an AD for this your second year, but talk about any of the changes you've seen in being an AD just in the short time that you've become one.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that I've learned is the emphasis that now is on social media, right? And whether it's posting games, posting all state awards, all region awards, um, all of those things, it's just a totally different experience than just my personal Instagram or my personal Facebook page, right? And so I can only imagine, not to date you, but like you said, getting into this back in the 80s, how different that is, even when you ended up retiring in 2013. Like I'm sure social media and everything changed
Oh,
so drastically from that.
no, it was great. You talk about when I retired. I retired in June 2013. And so the fall of 2013, that August, 2 months later, was the first register my athlete.
Oh,
The
wow.
first time, well, because I
Yeah.
used to have, and I've told this story before, so people that listen need to forgive me, but I would have two filing cabinets in the back corner of my office. The top two on the left were just for seniors, the bottom two were juniors, and then the one on the right was the top two for sophomores and the bottom two for freshmen. Because you had to keep all that stuff paper copies
Yeah.
before it was electronic, and you had to have it on each kid. And I remember going to volleyball games and bringing a stack of 3 foot high papers, checking every kid, watching the game, and it's a lot easier now, but you still have to be vigilant and make sure you check those for the kids. So I think it's a good thing that some of these things. But you're right, social media now is, boy, you've got to be so careful
Yeah.
with your school account and the kids and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I mean, learning as a new AD last year, kind of getting thrown into the fire. I had a month and a half before kind of our first volleyball game, which was the first event that I ever hosted here at
Mm.
Summit. And so I had to learn the handbook, all 236 some odd pages of that handbook, the UHSA handbook. I had to learn what register my athlete was. I had to learn what arbiter was. I had to learn what meat tracks was. And so like I had to learn everything just on the fly. And so there was definitely a learning curve to learning all the different technology, all the different websites, all the different interfaces that I had to learn. But thankfully, a year and a half in now, I think I have an okay grasp
Yeah,
on what I'm
well,
doing.
you're right. I mean, not to beat a dead horse, but when I started at Jordan, you had to send, it was before, I didn't even have a fax machine back then. So you had to copy a a list of your roster for your football team, your volleyball team, and then sent it to the UHSAA.
Oh, really?
And then they had a form you had to fill out. These are the dates you want officials for football, for volleyball, for basketball, and you
Yeah.
had that send that in. Of course, now it's a lot easier, but
Oh,
yeah.
I can only imagine how to do a game change back then.
Oh yes, yes, it was crazy. Nate, what's one common myth about being an athletic administrator that you'd like to debunk to the general public?
Yeah. The one that I think a lot of people come on this pod and they talk about is that it's not just being a part of sports, right? Um, and there's so much more that goes into Friday night, the game on Friday night, or the game on Thursday night for the basketball, right? Um, you got to politic, you got to do community outreach, you got to meet with the UHSAA, you got to be doing professional development with the UIAAA. So there's a lot of things that go into it that is not just sports related. You are also a business manager. You're managing a budget. There are a lot of things that go into this job. But the biggest thing that I want to dispel is that it can feel like you're on an island at a lot of times. It can feel like you're alone, right? I'm the only athletic administrator in all of Summit Academy, right? We have a couple guys that dabble in the middle schools, but as far as the high school, it is me, and so it can feel like we're on an island, but you're not. Like whether it's the people on ADEC that I have connections with, the people in the UIAAA that I have connections with, NIAAA that I have connections with. Um, I am not alone and I have resources. Kurt over at UHSA, he probably hates my guts because I call him all the time, asking him so many questions. Um, but yeah, Missy, Brennan, Kurt, uh, Chris, Rob, Jeff, they've all been huge supports and huge helps. They'll be the first person to tell you, like last summer, leading up to my first event here, I was over there probably two, three times a week, just asking questions, making sure that I'm not missing something. I didn't want to get fined for anything. That was one of my biggest fears last year was getting a fine from the association. And so being able to avoid that last year was one of my bricks actually. So we were able to
Sure.
avoid we were able to avoid all fines last year. So that was one of our bricks.
Nate, what's the favorite part of your job?
Yeah. I think my favorite part is that no days are ever the same. Um, I can go from having a budget meeting with our business administrator over at our Draper campus to going over and meeting with the ADEC reps to hosting a game here one night to meeting with parents the next night to meeting with team parents about banquets to laying out schedules with coaches. No 2 days are ever the same in this job. And it's when you think that they are that something surprises you and you're not prepared for. So, kind of being prepared for the unexpected, I think, is one of the biggest strengths to have in this job. Um, because, yeah, everything's going to catch you by surprise and being able to not sweat the small stuff.
Great insight. Thanks for sharing that. Let's
Yeah.
finish up with a couple of questions. I always ask this questions. It's a little bit different for you because you're only a second year AD, but I'm going to ask you, you've got two suggestions for a brand new AD, which you are one,
hmm
and they need to follow Nate's suggestions in order to be a success. What would your two suggestions be?
Yeah. Going back to kind of one of my biggest mistakes, right, was trying to take on too much too fast. Like, and the easiest way to eat an elephant is one bite at a time. Or like this is the philosophy behind the bricks. I came into this job and I tried to build the perfect wall. But the only way to build the perfect wall is to lay the perfect brick. And then once you build enough bricks, put enough bricks together, then you do have a perfect wall. So don't try to build a wall, just try to lay the perfect brick. That's what I would say is kind of one of the biggest pieces of advice. The next one is you don't know what you don't know. And so don't be afraid to ask questions, right? Um, ask your administrators at your school. Ask the UIAAA members that you're in contact with. Ask anybody in your region once a month if you have a region meeting. Make sure that you're using that time to pick everybody's brain and learn what you don't know. But yeah, definitely don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't assume that you just automatic already know. Make sure that you're kind of networking with your coaches as well, your coaches that have been doing this for a long time. They will know the lay of the land a little bit better than you do as a brand new AD in that school.
Great advice. Thank you for sharing. We'll finish with this. Nate, what questions should I have asked you that I failed to ask you?
I don't think anything. I think one of the things that I really wanted to talk with you about though is kind of like you've seen the landscape change so much in terms of athletics here in the state of Utah. Where do you kind of see the next 5 years going, the next 10 years going?
Oh,
I
that's
know
I
that I'm kind of
usually
turning the
no,
tables a little bit.
that's fine. I don't usually get asked a question during this part, but what occurs to me off the top of my head is as much as it's going to change, I see NIL being horrible. I see the transfer portal at college, and now in high school you can transfer if you sit out half the games.
Mhm.
I see both of those as a negative. I think it's ruined college athletics, and I think it's on the way to ruining high school athletics. And I think if I could give one piece of advice as an administrator of athletics and a coach, you've always got to remember that I borrowed this from my friend Damien in Connecticut. It's not about you, it's about the kids. And I think now and in the next 5 years, more than ever, we're going to need to remember that because the kids are being torn so many different ways and they got social media and it's so much different than when you graduated, what, 14 years ago. And
Yeah.
when I graduated, oh my goodness, um, 53 years ago, 54 years ago. I just think we need to, with all this mess that's here and all this mess that's going to keep coming, that's probably what we need to remember as ADs and particularly as head coaches. So, what are
Yeah.
your thoughts?
I think that being a smaller school, especially a smaller school that's surrounded by big schools, right? We are right in the heart of Lehigh, Corner Canyon, Riverton, Mountain Ridge, right? If you draw a little diamond, we are smack dab in the middle of that. And so there is a lot that we deal with in terms of those transfers. And so being able to create a culture, a community here that everybody wants to be a part of. I think that's what I was able to do over at Albion Middle School was I created a culture there that we we drew people in to be part of our PE program, and I was super proud of that. And I think that here at Summit, being able to create that same sort of environment where people want to be here to be a part of it, that's going to, I think, help create a little bit of a buffer between the mountain ridges, the Harrimans, the
Mm.
Rivertons, and we can kind of establish our own culture and community in our athletic department. So yeah, I I can only imagine. I've only seen one transfer policy change from last year to this year. You've probably been through it a couple times.
More
So
than a couple, yes.
it's probably changed year after year a lot of the time. But yeah, it's definitely a an ever-changing environment that we're going to have to be adaptable to. And I'm sure that this is not the last time that there's going to be a transfer rule change, especially with like you said, NIL going to the college ranks and kind of trickling down to high school ranks and transferring and jumping around school to school, all of that stuff.
Well, and that is a great question. So thank you for asking. And on that note, that wraps it up for this edition of the UIAAA Connection. Again, our special guest today has been Nate Foster, the Director of Athletics at Summit Academy. Nate, thanks so much for being on the podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me.
For our listeners, we hope you tune in again next week for another edition of the UIAAA Connection.